now Muriel Bonnerch will give Mrs. Roosevelt's speech.
Thank you, and good evening. I have come to talk with you this evening on one of the greatest issues of our time. That is the preservation of human freedom. Because the issue of human liberty is decisive for the settlement of outstanding political differences and for the future of the United Nations. The United Nations has made it clear that it intends to uphold human rights and to protect the dignity of the human personality. That the peace and security of mankind are dependent on mutual respect for the rights and freedom of all. The Human Rights Commission was given as its first and most important task the preparation of an international Bill of Rights. The International Declaration of Human Rights has come from the Human Rights Commission with unanimous acceptance, except for 4 abstentions: the USSR, Yugoslavia, Ukraine, and Belarus. Now, the reason for this is a fundamental difference in the conception of human rights as they exist in these states and in certain other member states in the United Nations. Now, I think it should be made crystal clear what these differences are. And tonight, I want to spend a little time making them clear to you. We must not be confused about what freedom is. Basic human rights are simple and easily understood. Freedom of speech and a free press. Freedom of religion and worship. Freedom of assembly and the right of petition. The right of men to be secure in their homes and free from unreasonable search and seizure. Free from arbitrary arrest and punishment. We must not be deluded by the efforts of the forces of reaction to prostitute the great words of our free tradition and thereby to confuse the struggle. Democracy, freedom, human rights have come to have a definite meaning to the people of the world, which we must not allow any nation to so change that they are made synonymous with suppression and dictatorship. There are basic differences that show up, even in the use of words, between a democratic and a totalitarian country. For instance, democracy means one thing in the USSR and another thing in the USA. Now, the USSR representatives assert that, well, they have already achieved many things which we, in what they call the bourgeois democracies, cannot achieve, because their government controls the accomplishment of these things. Our government seems powerless to them because, in the last analysis, it is controlled by the people. But they would not put it that way. They would say that the people in the USSR control their government by allowing their government to have certain absolute rights. We, on the other hand, feel that certain rights can never be granted to the government, but must be kept in the hands of the people.
All right.
For instance, the USSR will assert that their press is free because the state makes it free by providing the machinery, the paper, and even the money that pays the salaries for the people who work on the paper. They state that there is no control over what is printed in the various papers that they subsidize in this manner, such, for instance, as a trade union paper. But what would happen if a paper were to print ideas which were critical of the basic policies and beliefs of the communist government? I'm sure some good reason would be found for abolishing the paper. Now, it is true. There have been many cases where newspapers in the USSR have criticized officials and their actions and have been responsible for the removal of those officials. But in doing so, they did not criticize anything which was fundamental to the communist beliefs. They simply criticized methods of doing things. So, one must differentiate between things which are permissible, such as criticism of any individual or of the manner of doing things, and the criticism of a belief which would be considered vital to the acceptance of communism. What are the differences, for instance, between trade unions in the totalitarian states and in the democracies? In the totalitarian state, a trade union is an instrument used by the government to enforce duties, not to assert rights. Propaganda material which the government desires the workers to have is furnished by the trade unions to be distributed amongst their members. Our trade unions, on the other hand, are solely the instrument of the workers themselves. They represent the workers in their relations with the government and with management, and they are free to develop their own opinions without government help or interference. The concepts of our trade unions and those in totalitarian countries are drastically different. There is little mutual understanding. I think the best example one can give of this basic difference is the term, the right to work. The Soviet Union insists that this is a basic right which it alone can guarantee because it alone provides full employment by the government. But the right to work in the Soviet Union means the assignment of workers to do whatever task is given to them by the government without an opportunity for the people to participate in the decision that the government should do this. A society in which everyone works is not necessarily a free society, and indeed, maybe a slave society. On the other hand, a society in which there is widespread economic insecurity can turn freedom into a barren and vapid right for millions of people. We in the United States have come to realize the right to work means freedom to choose one's job. To work or not to work as one desires. We in the United States have also come to realize that people have a right to demand that their government should not allow them to starve because they cannot find the kind of work which they are accustomed to doing.
All right.
Was brought about by public opinion as a result of the Great Depression, in which many people were out of work. However, with the acceptance of this decision, we would not consider that we had gained any freedom if we were compelled to follow a dictatorial assignment to work where and when we were told. The right of choice would seem to us an important and fundamental freedom. In our democracies, we make our freedoms secure because each of us is expected to respect the rights of others. And we are free to make our own laws. Freedom for our people is not only a right, but also a tool. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of information, freedom of assembly. These are not just abstract ideals to us. They are tools with which we create a way of life in which we can enjoy freedom. The basic problem confronting the world today, as I said in the beginning, is the preservation of human freedom for the individual and consequently for the society of which he is a part. We are fighting this battle again today, as it was fought at the time of the French Revolution and at the time of the American Revolution. The issue of human liberty is as decisive now as it was then. We here in the United Nations are trying to develop ideals which will be broader in outlook, which will consider first the rights of man, which will consider what makes man more free. Not government,